Our first review of the day is going to be for the series Twisted Metal. Twisted Metal is a series starring Anthony Mackie, also Nev Campbell, who's in this. You also have Stephanie. Is her last name? How you pronounce it? It's Gutierrez. Is that how you pronounce it?
Gutierrez. I'm not 100% sure, but that sounds right.
Yeah. She was in people might know her. She was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. She was that character, and there was at a time that Beatrice, I think is Beatrice. I'm sorry, is how you pronounce her name. I believe it's how you pronounce her last name. And there was at one time people were campaigning for her to be She-Hulk. At one time, people really wanted her to be She-Hulk.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, maybe it's a good thing that she wasn't She-Hulk. I don't know. Maybe it's a kind of maybe a good thing that she wasn't.
For her, yeah.
But yeah, she's also in this series. And yeah, so this is based on the popular video game, which I never played myself. Sage, you've played the video game?
I have.
Okay.
Decent
And
amount of it too, yeah.
so from what I'm understanding, there is a somewhat story to the video game. If you want to elaborate on that a little bit, like.
Yeah, I mean it's really like, if you have any experience with like the older Mortal Kombat games where you have like a little blurb about them as like a character bio, and then you get like two still images with a couple sentences like voiced over as like an arcade ending. That's about as much story there is in Twisted Metal. I mean, it's light. Like it's really light. I mean, there was, one on the PS1, one on the like two on the PS2, one on the PS3 that wasn't super well received. But yeah, it's very, very light. I honestly feel like even if you have a ton of experience and have played like every game, I don't know that's going to make a huge difference going into this. I feel like you're still going to feel like you're watching something brand new for the most part. There's Easter eggs in the show, but from what I could tell, there wasn't that much of a sense of adaptation. And I think it's just because there's so little to actually adapt in these.
Yeah. And there are characters from the video game that are here in the show, like most famously that people might not know. Like people probably know the image of Twisted Metal because I just know like the cover of it and Sweet Tooth. Like that's what So I know that like that iconic image of like the clown and the fire on his head and everything like that. So I know that. And then here you have two people playing Sweet Tooth. So you have the physical performance. It's kind of like a Mandalorian situation where one person's doing the voice and then another person's kind of there doing all the movements. So you have Samoa Joe, who's a professional wrestler. People might know him if you follow that. He's a professional wrestler who's doing like the actual physical. You have Will Arnett. Will Arnett, people know he's been in he was the Horseman. He was in Arrested Development. He's been in a variety of different movies. He was in the TMNT live action Michael Bay movies. He probably wants to
forgot about that.
He probably wants to forget these. But he's the one that's providing the voice for Sweet Tooth here, which I heard a lot of people praise Samoa Joe for his performance of Sweet Tooth. A lot of the physical stuff he did there, how it kind of lined up with the voice. What did you kind of think about Sweet Tooth here in the series?
I think that's the highlight of the show, to be honest. And part of that's because it's one of the only things going in, if you're familiar with the games, it's one of the only things going in that you're going to recognize even. Because again, I feel like so much of it is just new. But I really liked that. I thought they handled him very well. He is sufficiently psychotic and just unreasonable at all times and in all situations. I thought the physicality and the voice matched each other really well. I thought that was blended really seamlessly.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting backstory that they do with him that I think is pretty funny. And then you also have another character from the game, Thomas Hayden Church, who plays Agent Stone, who's this main antagonist of the series. So the basic setup of the series is that the world went to shit 20 years ago, they say. What exactly happened? I don't think the series really states exactly what happened.
I'm going to pretend it's Y2K.
Yeah, maybe it's Y2K, something happened, whatever. The world all of it just went to shit. You do see like flashbacks with certain characters, like with Agent Stone's character when he was much younger, like when the world started to, go to shit and everything like that, a little bit of hints there, but mostly they keep it pretty vague as far as what happened. And then when the whole world went to shit, they start to build these walls around these cities. So you have all these major cities that start to kind of build the walls. Trump, he finally got his wish. All the walls just came up. So his wish finally came true, and all these walls came up around all these major cities. And it kind of left all the people in between to just fend for themselves, all these resources, everything like that, in an apocalyptic scenario, how those things go. And then you have a character, Anthony Mackie, plays John Doe. Why is he calling himself? Why is it John Doe? You say that's a pretty generic name. Well, he doesn't remember who he is, which is kind of a thing. He has no idea who his family is, doesn't remember his name, doesn't know his birthday, anything like that. So he just calls himself John Doe, and he's what in this world they delivers goods from city to city. And while he's doing that, of course, there's people who always are hunting to kill him for what he wants, to grab what he wants. And he has a specific car called Evelyn, which is souped up, which is from the game. It's a a racing game. All these things that you can modify, like Death Race or something like that, like machine guns on the cars and rockets and all that other stuff. So he does that. And he gets the opportunity when he meets Nev Campbell's character, Raven, who she's the mayor of New San Francisco. And it says, I have a special mission for you. And if you complete this mission, you're going to get the glory of staying in the city. You don't have to be a milkman anymore. You don't have to go and do these dangerous runs anymore. You get to live in the city and you have all these great accommodations. You get to have 2-ply toilet paper, that in a dream life if you complete. A lot of it is him trying to get this package and then delivering it back to New San Francisco. And then while he's doing that, he runs into all these different variety cast of characters. People like Sweet Tooth, people like Stephanie Beatrice character, who's called Quiet in this, who, as far as we know, is not from the video game. She isn't from the video game. That's a new character they created for this, just like as Anthony Mackie's character. He's also a character that they created for the show. So that's kind of the basic setup here. And I'll say, kind of starting off with the show, I kind of like that it's, with most post-apocalyptic stuff, it's pretty depressing, right? I mean, stuff like Children of Men, The Road, I Am Legend, Walking Dead, a lot of really sad stuff. I mean, it's definitely not very hopeful. Here, this is kind of one of the few times I've seen the post-apocalyptic thing done in a very much comedic way. Another time I've seen it done is, do you remember that show? I think it was on Fox. It was with Will Forte. I forgot the name of it. It was like another post-apocalyptic show.
Oh, was it Last Man on Earth? Was that the name of it?
Yeah, Last Man on Earth. Yeah, that show, which is kind of one of the other times I've seen it done in like the setting of a post-apocalyptic world, done in a kind of a comedic way. So I think that adds to kind of the fun of it, even though you're seeing these tragic things, because you'll see the traditional kind of like in the post-apocalyptic world, there's going to be, of course, you're going to meet the cannibals, right? There's always motherfuckers who just resort to eating people. You're going to see those type of people. You're going to see the people who are completely sadistic. Like there's a flashback that you see with Stephanie Beatrice's character and then her brother in the show, where it's just a town full of Orange County people who collect people's body parts, ears and fingers and noses and all this other, like completely like, and any other thing, if this was like The Last of Us, this would be the most horrifying episode of the show, like of that show. But because it's this Twisted Metal show, it's kind of like, I mean, it's still kind of horrifying, but it's kind of played, more of it in a comedic kind of sense in a way.
Gallows humor, right?
Yeah. So I kind of like that. So I'm going to pass it to you. I've been talking a lot here. Sage, what are some of your thoughts on Twisted Metal?
Yeah, well, like I said, I so much of it is not from the games in terms of having these two characters, John Doe and Quiet, and the kind of the relationship between them and them journeying across this world. The world is fleshed out. I know we were just saying that they don't really give you an exact reason as to what happened to kind of end the world, but it still feels like a vastly more fleshed out place than the games ever do. I mean, the games are just, here's an arena that's all trashed up. I don't even know if I ever got the sense that the world was over in the games. I always just kind of saw it as like, oh, this particular environment is super messed up because people are driving through it and fighting each other. But for the most part, this is about as newcomer friendly as an adaptation I think could get, because I think even if you played the games, you're going to feel like a newcomer. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed the sense of humor, because they showed a little clip of this show back in, I think it was at the PlayStation Showcase earlier this year. There was like a brief little clip, or maybe it
I
was
think
Summer
it might.
Games Fest.
I think it might have been Summer.
One of those. And it seemed, I don't know, it seemed a little like it didn't give me the greatest idea of what this was actually going to be. But I found myself enjoying this a lot more than I was expecting to. I kind of wasn't that looking forward to it. But once we got into it, I think Anthony Mackie is really charming. I think you could tell he's just having a really fun time making this and working on it, and I think that lends a lot to it. Um, I think that you don't. I wish there was a little more of the car combat. I think we kind of open up with a good sequence of it, but once you get past that, it's like maybe every 4 episodes there's like a brief car chase or a brief sequence with some car combat. Like up until like the last one, it doesn't really engage with it. One thing that I would put up as a negative is it did kind of remind me of that last Mortal Kombat movie just a tad. And I think especially if you're a fan of the game and you're like, oh, should I watch this? Is it worth giving a shot? The whole first season, it's kind of doing the same thing that last Mortal Kombat movie did, where it's like this is a prequel. The tournament of the car combat and competing to get like a wish is what it is in the game. There's like a kind of a almost like a devil character called Calypso, and everybody's trying to kill each other for a wish. And that doesn't play into the story like almost at all that's in this show. It feels like they made a prequel to the game, rather than, like I say, rather than like an adaptation directly. And in that sense, it makes sense. You have to fill out the story, you have to fill out this world. But with both of these characters, I enjoyed their chemistry. I thought their back and forth worked quite a bit. Sometimes I will say when the show did lean into drama a little bit more, that wasn't my favorite. I don't know if I felt like I was super invested in the characters' journeys on that level. But I did really appreciate when it stuck to its comedy, and it focused on that, and it maintained an air of just being really silly. I think is when this is at its best, and I think that part of the show actually works really well.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned some of the car chases. I think maybe it had a lot of that has to do with the budget. I mean, because it seems like they put
Yeah,
all the money into the last episode. They're like, listen,
yeah,
we're going to spend all this money on the one big action sequence on the end here. You see it at the beginning, which opens up pretty nice. You see him making a delivery there, and you see it like, okay, that was pretty cool. But yeah, pretty much that's not throughout the whole show. There's a bunch of those actually. They kind of space it out pretty nice. A lot of that probably has to do with the budget there of the show. Yeah, and I think the comedy elements of the show, Anthony Mackie, I think he's a good lead, and he does a lot of great things there with a lot of the physical comedy, and works. And he's kind of like, his characters are very much a motor mouth, very much just
yeah.
saying constantly all the time, saying something. So it just gives him a lot of chance to just kind of probably just riff and do a bunch of stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. It kind of depends. I think a lot of stuff they have going on, especially with also Sweet Tooth, works pretty well. A lot of stuff he does, like he even forms like his own gang at one point, and that was kind of funny for a minute there, which was nice. And yeah, they even do the iconic like head on fire scene with him, which was okay.
Mhm.
That was pretty good. So I wonder, I mean, if people who are big fans of the game, if this is going to be a thing for them, or are they going to like it because the story, it's not like there's a specific story to Twisted Metal or anything like that. That it's like,
Not
okay,
really.
I'm probably a big attachment to or anything like that. So I would wonder, what a person who is a huge fan of these games would kind of think of this. But yeah, the dramatic elements of it, I think, are just okay for the most part. Like you said, I think as a comedy, it works better than as a drama.
Yeah.
When it does that. Nev Campbell, who's in this, who people know, she was Nancy in the Scream movies, is what she's kind of very big for. And do you feel like, because she's only really in what, 2 episodes of this show, did you think there should have been more time spent with kind of her and San Francisco? And
Yeah, I do think so. I feel like, yeah, I feel like she was. I mean, and it could be that their plan is keep her on the back burner. We get a season two, then she'll feature a lot more. But yeah, I feel like she felt like so entirely there for exposition. I didn't feel like there was character, which in a comedy that maybe is okay that they don't really dig deep. But she also only, I mean, even within the two episodes she's in, would she have like 5, 6 scenes like total across those two episodes? Yeah, it just didn't leave a lot to attach yourself to or really even understand exactly what her purpose or desires or like how she interfaced with the world. I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more of the walled cities in general, because it seems like with the where they go by the end of it, it seems like we're only going to get into, if they do get a second season, only get more into the destroyed world than we are going to get into what these safe havens are. I could be wrong. Maybe that's not what they're thinking. Maybe they are going to show us more of that, but it seemed like if you're gonna kind of show us the mythology of this world, not that there's that much to it, but maybe just tell me a little bit more about that setting.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Correct myself. I said Nancy. I meant Sydney. I'm thinking of Nancy
Oh,
from Freddy
Sydney.
Crew. Yeah, Sydney Prescott.
Oh,
So
I didn't even think about it.
yeah, my bad about that. Correct myself there. I said that. I was like, wait, hold on. That's not her name. I'm thinking about
I'll be
something else. But
honest,
yeah,
I watch Scream and I just think Neve Campbell the whole time.
man. So yeah, that's my bad about that. I know somebody's gonna be in the comments. I know somebody's like, it's fucking. But yeah. So yeah, I will say so. Maybe a little bit more motivation with her, because in the show she's basically just, you see as just being evil, basically. Like,
Yeah,
and you don't really see a lot of the politics that goes on into maybe running. Maybe they're going to get into that if they do a second season of like what it takes to run a one of these new cities, everything like that, because I guess every city's a new city. Like they could say like I have to go to New Chicago, I got to go to New here and everything. So
yeah.
like what it takes to run one of these things, and maybe you do have to be very ruthless, I don't know. And so yeah, so I wish they showed a little bit more of that. What do you think about Thomas Hayden Church as Agent Stone? You think he's a good antagonist
I
then?
thought he was a pretty, yeah, I thought he was a pretty fun villain. Honestly, I think he knows just to chew the scenery just enough. He's certainly not like the most of the kind of psycho killer characters from the games. I actually didn't even remember that was Officer Stone or Agent Stone. I didn't even remember that was a character from the games. To be honest, I thought he was totally another new character. I suppose I could have looked that up beforehand, but I thought he was a pretty effective villain. I mean, is not going to pull the whole thing along. I also think maybe could have been in a little bit more too, just to kind of show him being that threat a little bit more. I think the biggest problem with him and that sect of the story, I guess I felt like we didn't see very much of the territory that he was like actually in command of or like actually ruling over. And so, I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect of like, oh, he's this big threatening character, but we mostly see him leaving his territory or in an interrogation room or following people somewhere else. And I think it would have helped what he was doing land a little bit more if we just kind of got a better grasp of like what is he actually in control of? Like what's the scope of that?
Mm, yeah. I see what you mean by that. But I think a lot of it because he's on the trail of Quiet, who runs it, who he ended up killing. He captured them and then branded her and then killed her brother. So she has wants to commit revenge against him, and he's kind of on her trail a lot. So there's this kind of that where they kind of come into conflict there. And like I said, this being kind of, it's like a road trip type aspect where he has to go get this package and then kind of bring it back to Nev Campbell's character. Him running into all these kind of different cast of characters. Like my favorite was when he ran into the people that were living on like the trucks and the like living in the trailers there.
Yeah, I
I
like
thought
that a
that
lot too.
feels like that feels like a character from the video. Is Granny Dread a character from the video? It feels like she would be a character from the video game.
I
I don't
think
know.
I think it is. I think it's a thing where like the name is there. and there's maybe a basic element of the visual design that's in the game, and then everything else
Okay.
you see in the show is kind of its own creation. I think for the most part, except for maybe Sweet Tooth, I feel like all the characters that are from the game, they didn't have much personality in the game. So like your preacher character, also played by Jason Mantzoukas, that comes up in one episode as well. I think again the personality of that character. He's from the game, but this is still very much its own thing.
Yeah. So I like those characters. I thought they were pretty good. Again, and in this kind of world, again, in any of the post-apocalyptic show, this would be such a huge threat. I mean, it'd be very scary, but just the way it's kind of played is pretty cool. So I kind of like that aspect there. You mentioned the Jason Mantzoukas who comes in here, who's the preacher character. He's of course he's Jason Mantzoukas. If you've seen him in like one thing before, he's basically Jason Mantzoukas in this as well. I mean,
Yes.
he usually plays like a very wild, crazy guy. And that's typically what he plays there. Did you like a lot of the backstories that they did? They do a lot of kind of flashbacks, fleshing out a lot of these characters, like with Anthony Mackie, with Stephanie Beatrice, Garrett Quiet, with Agent Stone. Did you like a lot of those? Well,
Yeah, I was back and forth on them. I don't think they totally don't work or totally work. I'm somewhere in the middle, just because I think a lot of the time that's when the show was trying to be at its most dramatic, which is where I would lose a little bit of interest in those moments, just because I felt like the comedy is what I'm here for, the comedy is what I'm enjoying, and when we step away from that, not bad necessarily, it just I don't know, not the most engaging. I think it's still nice to get those. You're still following these characters, and you still get a little bit more of a read on them. I think for the two leads, for John and Quiet, I think for them it felt more necessary. But yeah, sometimes I was not always as engaged with the backstories. I wish the backstories were funnier, I guess is my main takeaway.
okay, all right. You didn't find it funny when the dude got his ear cut off and he put it on a necklace? You didn't find that hilarious?
I mean, if maybe in a certain context, in a certain editing, it might have been a little funnier, but yeah.
Uh-huh. What would you say some of your biggest issues with the show are? Just the drama?
Well, like I said, yeah, I think the drama, I think just doesn't work as well. I think it should have stuck to being a little sillier, a little more often. Not that you can never have those moments of drama. Some of the comedy, some of the comedy doesn't always land too. As much as I say that, that's the part of the show I'm enjoying. I will say, I think it moves so quickly. It's almost like watching Robot Chicken at times, where it's like, if a joke doesn't work, by the time you're thinking about how you didn't like that joke, they're already telling a different joke. So the comedy that doesn't work is balanced a little bit by how fast it moves. I think, so trying to think negatives. Pacing, I think, is a positive. I think it's really fast, and I appreciate just how very quickly we get through it. I think Neve Campbell's character, like we said, maybe they'll flesh her out more in a season 2, hypothetically. But I think so in the game, everything's kind of centered around. There's a character named Calypso he's basically Satan, right? He's like a supernatural being, and he's whoever wins the car tournament and kills everybody else gets a wish. And I almost wonder if Neve Campbell maybe shouldn't have just been replaced with that character in the show. It felt weird to like do here's your. She felt like an NPC giving you a quest to me.
Mm,
It felt like a
yeah.
video game character giving you a quest, and you don't really care about that character. And I think there were a few times in some of the other episodes where, like, I really liked the one where they're on the moving trucks with Granny Dread. I thought that was good. I think the preacher thing. I think that was fun. There's a couple times where I don't know. Maybe some of the other characters they feel like video game NPCs because there's just so surface level interaction with them. But again, that also works because of the pacing, but also doesn't work because I wish I just knew a little bit more about where we were and what's going on. I don't know. There's a balance here where it's like every positive I can think of, there's a negative to kind of counter it, and every negative I can think of, there's a positive and there's somewhere to kind of counter it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, you don't want to think maybe too hard about it because as far as like, because he's driving all these distances, I don't know where he's getting the gas from. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question.
you know, like I don't know, that's a lot of gas. I don't know where he's getting all that gas from, but
That's another thing that's
um,
super believable in a game, but then when you translate it into this live action thing, it's like, all right, well, how does that work logistically?
yeah, and you're right about like some of the video game stuff, like when the Granny Dread stuff. It's like, oh, in order to get this, I need to go and do this to grab this from this other person to give it back to you, and then you can help me and upgrade my equipment and do that,
Yeah,
and so there's some of that there as well. So yes, it does kind of have those video game elements. Like you mentioned, the pace, and the pace is pretty good. I mean, these episodes are only like 30 minutes, they're only like basically
yeah,
30 minutes, so
super
it's easy
quick.
to get through all these episodes, 10 episodes, 30 minutes. You can watch it basically in a day. I did that. I basically just watched it in a day. You can just boom, 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 watch all these episodes. And just move to the next one, to the next one. The comedy, as far as the ratio, like as far as like if you had to put it into a percentage, like the amount of times it's funny versus not, it's like maybe 60-40, I'd say, maybe.
That's what
Like
I was gonna
it
say.
hits
Yeah,
more than it misses, maybe for
but
it.
it misses enough to
Um
notice, maybe too.
Yeah, it's definitely when some of these miss, it's like, yeah, that wasn't so good. Again, like I said, with Anthony Mackie's character, him being a motor mouth, it's just like, yeah, some stuff is gonna stick, some stuff it's like Deadpool, some stuff is gonna stick, some stuff
Yeah,
not so much. And when he first meets Quiet, it's it's a little repetitive, and it goes on for a little long, I think. And it's not until maybe they get more settled in, maybe like midway through, I'm like, okay, their relationship is a little bit more a little bit more defined, a little bit better. They start to, kind of warm up to each other more because it's, they have a very contentious relationship there. So that kind of gets a little tiring when they first meet.
yeah. The opening
Yeah,
up
a little,
phase takes too long.
yeah. So I thought that. Um, yeah. So I would say, just to go, I guess I'll go into my rating here. Solid show. I would say where this ends, I am interested to see a season two. And I'm like, okay, I do kind of want to see a scene. I do want to see this big tournament that they're gonna do. Like you said, it's almost like the Mortal Kombat thing where it's a prequel where they're setting up the big tournament and how all these people get involved in this tournament. There. So I think that was kind of smart to make it a prequel because it gets you to care about some of the people or know some of the people who's involved in it and kind of that. So I was like, okay, so that makes a little bit more sense there. So if they're doing that, so I was like, okay, yeah, I like that. So I would be interested to see a season two and to flesh out some more of the characters like Nev Campbell's character and to see some of these cities and everything like that. And you see the whole kind of arc with Quiet's character where she's kind of giving back to the people who are outside the walls and everything like that. So that seems like good stuff with her. So yeah, I'd be up for seeing it. So Peacock, I guess I mean, you got me. You got me on the hook. You know what I mean? And I got to add another streaming service to my roster. I would say maybe to come back this, because I guess it has two shows now that I'm watching: Poker Face and this. So I would give it on our rating scale. Let's stream it. A solid kind of stream it for me. What about you?
I'm in the exact same place. I would also give it a stream. It's got enough flaws that it's not, I wouldn't tell anybody, hey, you got to run out and see this. This is great. You gotta be part of this. It's not one of those kinds of like big heavy hitter shows. But I also enjoyed it, like I said, more than I expected to. I was pretty pessimistic going in, so and some of that maybe made me enjoy it because just because my expectations were very low. But yeah, I think it does enough that works. The prequel idea, it's much more effective than it was in the Mortal Kombat movie. I'll say that. And I would like to see a season two, if only because hey, this time we're actually doing the game, and I do think I'd be interested in how they.
Yeah. So that was Twisted Metal. I'm using that two streamers for it.